Welcome to Channel AMEC, your insight to the Australian visa system. Good day everyone, my name's Carl Young, your online YouTube visa consultant. Are you interested about migrate to Australia? Why don't you consider to subscribe to my channel and turn on the little bell on the side so once we have all the updates and news, you'll be the first one getting all the insight. Now in today's video, we would like to bring you a news. Came out not long ago, a couple hours ago actually, in regards to the overwhelmingly support on migrants to actually getting permanent residency. Now interestingly, if you follow my channel long enough, you notice that since the pandemic hit, obviously the economy got hit badly, the whole voice and information came out from the government side, or perhaps the social or the public has all pushing towards a potential of the migrants getting permanent residency. Now compared to about 3-5 years ago, it was coined in regards to temporary migrants only, not giving out too many of the residency. And obviously you notice that they had decreased the quota of the permanent intake. However, this is all changed, well, due to the pandemic and the COVID-19, which had hit not just Australia but globally. Anyway, how the government of Australia respond as per my previous estimation predictions, obviously opening up the migration policy is the way to go. Now again, once again we have this news came out, and it's it's in support of obtaining more and more permanent resident intake to help the economy and the Australia continue to move forward. As we see the title as it reads, Australians, well that means the locals, found to overwhelmingly support path to permanent residency for migrants on temporary visas. Now there's currently so many temporary visa holders in Australia, and obviously we're seeing so many friendly and flexible intake and extensive policies to actually encourage, for example, international students to continue to come back to Australia, and also the temporary visa holders for working rights in order to help the shortfall of the skill currently in Australia. Now you may notice if you're in Australia now, if you attend any supermarket nowadays, you may see the shortfall and the skill shortage that had caused all the stocks not even on the actually supermarket for you to actually buy. Anyway, let's have a read what this news actually talking about. So, exclusive majority believe migrants should have ability to plan a future no matter which visa they hold. Now this is a huge change and an overhaul of what it was. If we're going back to 2016, 2017, you cannot believe it. You cannot believe it. You know, the news articles in regard immigration and migration policy back in 2016 and 17, or perhaps 2018, they were all talking about there are too many migrants, too many international students. We don't need them. Okay, back then the news were like that, the media were like that. Now, the reason I can see the change, the whole direction, obviously is due to the economy. Again, you know, Australia cannot continuously rely on export of coals and iron ores and things like that. How about international education? How about hospitality? How about tourism? How about all the other service industries? They need people, and with the mass, as the sixth largest continent in the world, they need more people there. So this is good news for us, and this is also, as I said, the next 3 to 5 years would be the good window period for people who are interested to migrate to Australia. So make sure you have that, you grasp that opportunity there. Okay, so let's read on. Australia overwhelmingly support a pathway to permanent residency for migrant on temporary visa who have lived and worked in Australia? Well, for sure, a lot of international students who does not live and work in Australia. This is a new research showing that the independent survey found that 78%, wow, of Australians believe migrants already live and work in Australia should have pathway to permanent residency. Now, that's a very good point. The survey commissioned by the Human Rights Law Centre found that majority of people believe migrants help fill skill shortage for particular job, 58%, and bring cultural diversity to Australia, 54%. 1/3 to 33% believe that migrant work in lower paid job that Australian citizen doesn't want to do, and nearly quarter of 24% believe migrant and counteract Australia's aging population. Now, this is all true figure. I cannot stress too much, but there are still politicians out there saying that we don't need skilled workers, but it's just not correct, because you can see regional Australia, for example, the meat works, all the agricultural fields, and all these regional areas, they are lack of skilled workers out there. All right, a minority of 26% of migrants should only be allowed to stay in Australia for long as the unemployer wants them. Well, if they are already at work, why wouldn't the employer want them? Interestingly, a survey conducted by Essential interviewed 1,095 Australian residents in December. So not long ago, David Burke, legal director of Human Rights Law Centre, said that every person should have opportunity to plan their life with some security. So this actually matches to all the news article that came out from October onwards. October 2021, started from New South Wales' new premier saying that they need 2 million migrants, and all the politicians had frequently came out and saying the same thing as well. Now, that is not just the current government. I know that there is a federal election coming up. It is the same across the opposition as well. So the other side of the government, it having the same plan for migration as well. Possibly even better one, but anyhow, see what happens. But the federal government's visa system is keeping people in limbo and often unable to reunite their family. I think this is you cannot blame federal government too much, but this is more towards the pandemic issue and the travel restrictions. These results show that people clearly recognize the justice of policies that leaving their neighbors, colleagues, and friends stuck in uncertainty simply because of visa they hold. Burke said that disruption caused Australian migration program caused by pandemic has given Australia the opportunity to reset its approach to immigration. I think that's it's a fair say, and I do believe there has been a certain plan for the reset. Now, the reset basically, first of all, one thing that we are pretty certain is that the quota for permanent intake will increase and increase year by year. And that's a good thing. So that means the EOI, the skill migrants, the EOI required points will drop because they got more position to take. And also the continuation of promoting 491 regional skill work will still be the key frame here. Our political leaders should take steps and ensure system reflect the value of community by allowing migrants and refugees living in Australia having a stable future. And that is the key. Now, that basically meant a couple of years ago, it's not stable. If you have been in Australia since 2016 and across to 2018 or 19, just before pandemic hit, you probably will know what it actually meant, because back then policies not really is uncertain. The skilled migrant required to have very, very high points to actually get invited. And then the employer sponsor visa has been really strict and very hard. And now we are waiting for this year, 2022. Perhaps the employer sponsored working visa will be readjusted back to where the 457 visa used to be. And that's a good news for Australia as well. All right, Australian migration system was significantly reformed in second half of 1990 in prioritizing skilled migration over family reunification and to emphasize temporary migration to Australia. And that was the key, and the height was back in 2017 and 18, where people get a lot of visa, but they probably cannot get permanent residency after all. So we are at the stage where they are rolling it back. Well, for sure they have to do it because over the pandemic, the economy isn't well, and through the budget plan, one of the plan for immigration is to increase intake as well. Okay, while the number of temporary visa granted has shown massively, particularly driven by the increase in international student, the number of permanent places has now grown proportionally. The two-step model Australian migration, a temporary visa being converted to permanent residence, has broken down many temporary migrants unable to find pathway to permanent residency. So all this is saying now, you got to bear in mind, this is an article coming out from independent survey, not the government. But if it's on the news, it's basically a way that to show that the government also have a view of going in that pathway too. Okay, the COVID-19 travel restriction had dramatically reduced the full form of the migration over the past 2 years. The report from Migrant Workers Centre in November argued the growth of temporary migrant visa had turned Australia into a guest work state. Well, that's a very good phrase. That means people come to work and go back home. And created underclass of young, vulnerable, and often exploited migrant employees. So if the structure can actually make it better, meaning that they have pathway to permanent residency, it'll make it easier. However, we'll see what happens. The report found that nearly 2/3, 65% of the temporary visa holder had experienced wage theft. Wow, that's not too good. The absence of lack of permanent pathway to permanent settlement exaggerated the vulnerability. 91% of those workers who experienced wage theft had no pathway to permanent residency. Why? Because the employer probably know that these guys, after years, they were gonna go home. So how are they gonna sue them? How are they gonna make a complaint to the Fair Work Ombudsman? So they probably exploit it through that sort of attitude, which is no good. Australian migration regime has lost balance. The government issued an unlimited number of temporary visas while tightly controlled number of permanent visa issue. As a result, most migrant workers are forced to hop from temporary visa to another until exhaustion. Well, that's very true because we see a lot of working holiday makers. Once the visa expires, they lodge another student visa and continue to work. Well, probably not just for him or her wanting to work, but the employer want them to do it. And sometimes we've seen employers helping those workers to lodge those student visa. And not by saying the 408 visa, how about that? Anyway, the chief executive of Migration Workers Centre, Matt Kunkel, sorry for the pronunciation, told The Guardian that unless you've navigated Australian visa system, it's hard to understand the huge psychological toll being permanent and temporary can cause. That is extremely true. Now, I've been in this industry long enough to say that that is exactly true. And that is the reason that triggered me to create this channel, to make things more transparent so that everybody will have more information, understanding about the visa system. From our research, migrants who have pathway to permanent residency are less likely to be mistreated at work, and they're good things of all good workers in Australia. The issue to face temporary visa holder have been consistently identified by government agency, and that's the Productivity Commission. Identified back in 2016. They knew this back in 2016, and now they're doing it. Temporary visa to permanent was problematic, noting that temporary immigrants face higher risk of being exploited. Yeah, the ACTU told the Productivity Commission, employer-sponsored visa, where workers are dependent on their employer for their ongoing visa status, increase the risk of exploitation as workers are less prepared to speak out if they are underpaid. Now that's a huge problem. That's a huge problem. How did the government back then did it? They if you probably have done this video a long time ago, I think 2 years ago, how they have done it, they cut about 20,000 employer-sponsored visa. and making all these 20,000 visa holders in Australia limbo on the bridging visa, I think, until today. And that is the reason, I think 6 months ago, the current Minister of Immigration, Alex Hawke, had actually announced for the Section 48 bar lifted for some of the visa holders, and those were the employer-sponsored visa applicants. The Bureau of Statistics in the same year know that there was a threefold increase in number of people who arrived on temporary visa, remain temporary visa 8 years later, compared back in 2013. So that is the exact information in regards to this news article, which I would like to share with you guys. I understand the reason I'm doing this video, to make a video format, and also in a way that you can listen to as well, because sometimes searching on these news articles is not something that people do it daily, but through my channel we do that every day. So make sure you subscribe to the channel and turn on a little bell on the side. Anyway, I shall see you next video. Goodbye.